There is a moment early on in The Last of Us Part 2 that has stuck with me for an unreasonable amount of time. No, not that moment.
Go quit cogitating, Steinmetz, and use an open-faced club. The sandwich.
Open-faced club sandwich.
In the tutorial areas, Ellie and Dina are on a patrol around Jackson. You reach an area with some ruined houses you can explore. In one of them you find a note, a young boy named Eric's letter to Santa asking for a dog to help keep him and his dad safe from the monsters, to help his dad with hunting, and to keep Eric company when his dad locks himself away. It's a real gut punch right out of the gates. I only recently played through The Last of Us Part 2. When it was initially released in 2020, I had to give up playing it about 4 hours in. The unrelenting misery of the game was just too much for my mental health in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, and since then, it's sat on my shelf, taunting me. With the recent remastered release on PC and the second season of HBO's big budget adaptation, I decided to finally give it the time it deserves. When The Last of Us arrived in 2013 as the swan song for the aging PlayStation 3, I fell in love with it. Joel and Ellie's journey across the ruins of the United States spoke to me in ways that even Naughty Dog's previous franchise, Uncharted, hadn't managed to. The mixture of high drama, dreadful body horror, and astonishing technical achievement was like nothing else available at the time. Naughty Dog had genuinely elevated the gaming medium and created a timeless work of art. The game also happened to be my first foray into YouTubing, with it being the first Let's Play I recorded on my old channel, The Gadget Addicts.
So we're going to press on now, and we'll have a bit of fun with the infected. We have, in this episode, we'll meet a new kind of infected, which is kind of halfway between your typical runner and a clicker.
Oh god, listen to that commentary audio. Woof. For a linear, story-heavy game, it's one of the few I've returned to over and over again. I've completed it at least 4 times, and for a while it became a comfort game for me. Something I'd play to turn my brain off and relax, which feels a touch ironic given how stressful that game is. Before I get into the meat of this video, this is just a quick word to let you all know that this video is brought to you via my free Patreon account. I don't use social media much, but my Patreon is where I post my thoughts and progress on making these videos. At this point there's no paid tier, and there won't be until this channel gets much bigger. But if you'd like to get some behind the scenes posts on the making of these videos, head over to patreon.com/gadgetongaming and hit the join button. Or if you don't fancy doing that, hitting the like button on this video or even subscribing to the channel would be amazing and would help me out so much. The Last of Us Part 2 takes place 4 years after the events of the first game. Joel and Ellie have integrated into the community of Jackson, Wyoming, and they've made lives for themselves. But over time their relationship has become strained, and Ellie has put some distance between them. She never truly believed Joel after he took her from the Fireflies in Salt Lake City, and despite his effort to build bridges, Ellie is keeping him at arm's length. In the tutorial sequences, we're introduced to Dina, Ellie's romantic flame, and someone who will become increasingly important to her throughout the events of the game. The duo will go on patrol through the surrounding areas of Jackson, and we'll see their nascent romance start to blossom. This sequence also introduces the players to the second playable character, Abby. We'll alternate between Ellie and Abby in the prologue as she searches the mountains around Jackson for someone she's been hunting down for a long time. These threads will slowly start to converge as the prologue goes on. Abby will be caught out by a horde of infected, only to be rescued by Joel and his brother Tommy. They battle through the horde, and Abby gets them to run to the lodge that she and her friends have holed up in for the night. Ellie and Dina get word that Joel and Tommy haven't checked in from their patrols, so they take up the search to find them. Now I'm going to put the spoiler warning in here. If you haven't played The Last of Us Part 2 and intend to, or haven't seen Season 2 of the HBO show and want to watch it, this is your final warning. Spoilers are coming immediately after this, and it's a fucking doozy. In the lodge, Joel and Tommy introduce themselves to Abby's crew, and everyone goes quiet, until Abby turns around with a shotgun and near enough blows Joel's leg off.
A few hours down the hill. Y'all should come back with us, restock before we head out.
Appreciate it. I'm Mel, by the way.
Tommy, this is my brother.
Joe. Y'all act like you heard of us or something.
Because they have.
clear?
He's out. Put him against the wall.
Tommy! Get off me! Get off me! Puta madre.
Joel Miller.
Who are you?
Guess.
Why don't you say whatever speech you got rehearsed? Get this over with.
Tourniquet his leg. Do it.
Don't you fucking move.
God! Damn it!
Clear out. You stupid old man. You don't get to rush this.
Ellie sees all the dead infected outside the lodge and worries that something has happened to Joel. Getting into the building, she can hear pained shouts and screams. Bursting into the basement, she's clocked by someone and dragged to the floor. Joel has had the shit kicked out of him and Ellie begs them to leave him alone. One of Abby's crew, Owen, tells her that they need to finish up and leave, so she takes her golf club and we watch Ellie as she's forced to watch Abby kill Joel right in front of her.
Joel, get up. Joel, fucking get up. Please stop. Please don't shoot. Joel, please get up. No! I'll fucking kill you.
Abby lets Ellie and Tommy live and the group leaves Jackson. Joel was her target and she completed the job. This is our inciting incident for Ellie. She wants justice for Joel. No, scratch that, she wants revenge for Joel, but she calls it justice. After Joel's funeral and after Tommy takes off to find Abby and her group, Ellie and Dina leave Jackson to head to Seattle to find the Washington Liberation Front, the WLF, and we start the game proper. Now, I don't intend on doing a full story retrospective for this video. The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the best-selling games of the decade, and there's millions of hours of content out there already recounting the game's story. No, instead I want to talk about this game as more of a critique. As a winner of 300 Game of the Year awards, you'd be forgiven for going into Part 2 expecting the greatest game of all time. A transcendent experience that will be impossible to match in a game that lives up to the standard of its forebear. And in a lot of cases, Part 2 does excel. It's genuinely one of the most beautiful and realistic games I've ever played. Naughty Dog have done work with their proprietary game engine that borders on actual witchcraft, and Nixes did an incredible job porting the game to the PC. Then there's the performances. Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker return as Ellie and Joel respectively, and Ashley Johnson's Critical Role co-star Laura Bailey takes on the role of Abby. Now I want to put it down now, I think this game might have some of the greatest acting performances, not just of any game, but of any dramatic medium. I genuinely believe that this game should be studied by actors and students. I don't even have the vocabulary to express how sublime the character performances are in this game. I just need you to trust me that it excels, and I genuinely feel like it should be held up as a standard for studios to try and meet. I'd also be remiss if I didn't gush about the actual gameplay experience too. Part 2 might be hands down the best stealth action game I've ever played. Naughty Dog have taken everything they've built across the Uncharted series and their first Last of Us game and polished it to a mirror sheen. Let's start with exploration. Throughout the 6 chapters you'll spend in Seattle, you'll be exploring a lovingly rendered, densely populated version of the ruined city. The first chapter of Ellie's story will have you exploring a large open-world map on horseback as she looks for clues to Abby's location. Now this might be my favourite part of the whole game, and I sincerely wish they'd have made more areas of the game like this, rather than reverting to more linear level design after this opening area. For the most part, this is a quiet time, allowing Ellie and Dina to have conversations and do a little bonding as you clear buildings and small combat areas off the beaten path. It really rewards fastidious players too. For instance, if you follow the clues laid out in the notes, you'll find a bank off to the edge of the map. Once you've cleared out the infected and crack open the vault, you'll find an early shotgun, which is a nice reward for paying attention. This open area gives you a lot of characterization for Dina. As the pair search for fuel for a generator, they'll explore a synagogue, and we'll learn that Dina is Jewish, which also leads to some history on Judaism and Dina's perspective on faith and being a born survivor. Then there's the music shop, where we get to see Ellie serenading Dina with a beautiful version of a-ha's Take On Me, which is, unironically, one of my favourite covers of that song. The open world area sadly doesn't last very long. After exploring a WLF stronghold at a hotel and seeing Tommy's unique style of interrogation, the game reverts to linearity after Ellie's horse, Shimmer, encounters a roadside bomb and is sadly killed by WLF members. From here, the game is entirely linear. Exploration is still a part of the game, but it's reduced to the odd open building or side path whilst you're funneled down the critical path. You'll move through a mix of stealth sections, combat encounters, and environmental puzzles, with the game becoming a much more curated experience and your freedom being sadly curtailed. Great pains have been taken to ground Part 2 in a level of realism that other games would normally ignore. You can see this in the weapon upgrade system. Throughout the world, you'll find scraps that become currency for upgrades at a workbench. When you buy an upgrade, you're treated to a painstakingly detailed set of animations showing Ellie or Abby meticulously disassembling the weapon and installing the new upgrade. From this point on, the upgrade is also visible in cutscenes where the weapon is shown, which is a nice little detail. Another aspect to the grounded realism is the environmental storytelling and set dressing of the buildings in the game. For example, in Abby's section, as she and Lev work towards the hospital, you'll come through this apartment. As soon as you walk in, you'll see the dining table littered with tabletop role-playing paraphernalia. The 2 men who lived here were young, probably in their 20s. Their bedrooms reflect this. They're messy, filled with gadgets, collectibles, and the assorted detritus that young men accumulate in their first homes. There are notes being passed back and forth between the men and their neighbour in the opening days of the apocalypse, showing they are protective of their neighbour and her mother and working together to survive and stay safe, until one of the men is unfortunately killed on the roof of the building. The apartment looks perfectly lived in, and it's just one of hundreds of apartments and buildings you'll work your way through across the story. Combat and stealth are, like every other Naughty Dog game, top notch. Weapons have heft and all perform differently from one another. They also perform differently between the 2 protagonists. Abby is much stronger than Ellie, so she wields the rifle and shotgun with ease, making your base level aiming and recoil much easier to manage. The range of damage dealing options available to each character is vastly increased from the first game too. By the end of their sections, they'll both have access to 2 shotguns, 2 long guns, and a silent option, a bow for Ellie and a crossbow for Abby. On top of this, they both have access to improvised explosives which can be crafted in the field and allowed for tactical approaches to encounters. In particular, the trip mines that Ellie gets to use are outrageously useful for managing large groups of enemies or charging shamblers. There is, however, one wrinkle with the gameplay for me. One aspect that I think doesn't work as well as it could, and that's the platforming. Yes, there's light platforming in this game. You're exploring a destroyed city with ruined buildings, occasionally you're going to need to jump across things. For the most part, it's not difficult, but there is an inconsistency to how far both protagonists can jump. There are so many times when you can see the game almost forcing the character back so they'll have to mantle up a ledge, when in other jumps they'll make it cleanly without an issue. It's not a massive problem for me, but it constantly takes me out of the moment and reminds me that this is a video game. Honestly, I can't see a reason for it. It doesn't increase the tension of the moment, it just looks really fucking janky. But you know what's not janky? The graphics. Holy shit is this game gorgeous. I don't even need to say much about it, just enjoy some of the vistas the game shows you. stealth encounter design is where part 2 really comes into its own. As an example, in Ellie's second chapter she encounters a new faction who will become significant in Abby's story, the Seraphites, known by the WLF as Scars. I'll talk about the faction in more detail later, but I want to show you this encounter. The Scars have been hinted at in WLF logs and notes throughout the game to this point, but your first introduction to them has Ellie coming out to an overgrown park after a particularly intense infected section, only to take a fucking arrow to the shoulder. The Seraphites massively outnumber you here and you need to escape. They communicate by a series of whistles that make logical sense. They whistle back and forth to keep track of their own positions. When they find a fallen comrade, they'll use a more frantic alert whistle to let the group know of danger, and, most importantly, they move slowly and quietly. Outside of the whistles, your listening power struggles to get a bead on them, forcing you to pay attention to the whistles and which direction they're coming from. Also, they're goddamn snipers with their arrows. Silent weapons that screw with your perception of direction. To this point, you've been conditioned to listen out for gunshots and enemy voice lines to work out where threats are coming from during a fight, so suddenly being forced into an encounter where half the enemies have silent weapons ratchets up the tension. It forces you to engage with the stealth mechanics to survive. It's also possible to get an arrow stuck in your shoulder, forcing you to stop and remove it before you can move on. It's not just the Seraphites that mix up the stealth sections though. The WLF have a K9 division. Yes, that's right, they're bringing German Shepherds on patrol, and I want to put this out here now. Whoever in Naughty Dog thought this up is a sick fuck. You bastard. The dogs force you to keep moving during stealth. When you engage the listen power, you'll see a scent trail leading back to you. Even if you haven't alerted the WLF soldiers, the dogs will still pick up your scent and start trailing you. It's clever, it prevents you from camping out in a spot and observing the movement patterns of the soldiers. It forces you to keep moving. If you do get spotted, they'll send the dogs after you first, and then all bets are off. If you get caught, you're knocked to the ground, rapidly tapping a QuickTime event to escape, and giving you a close-up of Ellie stabbing the poor creature, or you have to kill it before it gets to you. I don't like killing the dogs. And somehow it's worse if you take out the soldier and leave the dog alone. Their ears go back and they whine and pace around the corpse of their owner. Why, Naughty Dog? Why would you do this to me? I love dogs! Sorry. The additions to the enemy encounters aren't just restricted to humans though. We have some new infected to deal with. Alongside the runners, clickers and bloaters, we have two new variants, the shamblers and the stalkers. The stalkers are retconned into the cordyceps lifestyle as the second stage of infection, between a runner and a clicker. They have sprouted a lot of fungus across their body and they haven't gone blind yet, meaning they're strong, fast, and it doesn't matter how quiet you are, if they see you, they're coming. Their main shtick is they will, well, stalk you. You tend to encounter them in dense buildings where they'll use the environment to try and flank you, sprinting out of cover to grab you. They have a brief audio bark when they spot you and attack, but if you're not looking at them when you hear this, you're as good as caught. They also have a horrible habit of hiding in the fungal undergrowth of the environment, leaping out at you when you get close. Dicks. Where the stalkers are quick and deadly, the shamblers are slow and lethal. I'm not sure that's an apt comparison. These abominations are variants of bloaters, their particular mutation covering their mouths rather than their eyes so they cannot bite you. No, instead they blast out caustic poisonous gas. They hurl it like a grenade, or if they get close enough they just blast it out in a cloud around them. Someone's played Hollow Knight. More often than not they'll come in pairs, so you have to manage space as you lead them around remote mines, explosives or molotovs. Getting close to them is not an option and they're absolute bullet sponges, so making use of your traps and incendiary devices is the best way to deal with them. One part of this game that doesn't make sense for me, however, is the existence of runners. Clickers are described in the first game as a late stage of the infection, implying that after infection a person will eventually become a clicker as the cordyceps infection grows in their body. The Last of Us Part 2 is set 25 years after Infection Day. Why are there so many runners in the world? Shouldn't we be encountering more clickers, bloaters and shamblers rather than runners or stalkers? This is something that bothered me about the first game, but it continues to bother me about the sequel, especially when there's been so much effort to put new variants of infected into the story. There's one more infected that we'll meet and boy howdy, he's a big one. In the second chapter of Abby's story, she has to get medical supplies from the Seattle General Hospital. The WLF have picked the place clean except for the lower floors, which were ground zero for the infection in the city, and they've been largely sealed off and left alone. This has allowed something big to grow down there. As she explores the trauma center, she hears a deep growling and rumbling. Once the power's been restored to the area, she'll find a door has been smashed open and a horrible blood trail leads in the same direction she needs to go. And then we see it. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Rat King. This Lovecraftian horror is an infected made of the distorted bodies of several clickers, runners, shamblers and bloaters that over time have fused together to become the embodiment of every possible nightmare a person could have. There's no tactic to fighting this creature, no trick, you just need to unload everything into it, and yeah, keep running. It's a one-hit kill if it gets you. The Rat King isn't so much a new variant, it's just a fucked up monster that acts as the first major boss fight of the game. It's awful in all the best possible ways. As you play through the game and the story's themes develop, you'll start to notice that you'll be dealing less and less with Infected. The focus of the experience is about revenge, and the terrible things people do to each other. The Infected gradually become a sideshow, a palate cleanser between encounters with humans. This is not a zombie action game, this is a stealth action game with occasional zombies. One feature I'm glad that Naughty Dog implemented into their encounter design is the ability to pit humans against Infected. This was notably missing from the first game, only appearing in the Left Behind prequel DLC. In Ellie's chapters, there's a particularly tense stealth section that finds you in a subway station with WLF soldiers looking for you and clickers patrolling. Throw one brick and watch the chaos unfold. It's deeply satisfying letting them battle each other while you just sneak past unmolested. Given the title of this video, I'd forgive you for thinking that I've missed the point and just gushed about the game. Well, I have no complaints about the gameplay, it's genuinely a stellar game to play. No, my issues are with the narrative, and boy do I have some issues. Before I get started proper, I need to caveat the things I'm about to talk about. The Last of Us Part 2 has proved to be a very divisive game, and over the years has sparked a vast amount of vitriolic arguing from both critics and defenders of the game. Many of the quote-unquote critics of the game approach the discourse in bad faith, taking exception to things like Abby's muscular design, the inclusion of a trans character, and the recontextualization of Ellie as a villain. Conversely, many defenders of the game have approached any criticism of the story or the themes as sexist or misogynistic attacks, or acted like critics simply lack the cognitive capacity to understand it. Even now, 5 years since the game's release, people are still impassioned in both directions. Before I started writing the script, I made a post about the game and my thoughts on it over on Our Patient Gamers, and I got a wealth of responses from both camps, as well as a few private messages insulting me. Classic Reddit. So before I launch into my issues with the game's narrative, I'm going to drop some quick bullet points to remove all doubt up front. 1. I understood the story and the themes. 2. I like that Joel was killed off to kick off the story. 3. I really liked Abby as a character and I really enjoyed her side of the story. 4. Ellie is the villain of the story and we aren't supposed to side with her. 5. These are my opinions entirely. You're welcome to disagree with me, and if you adored this game, which I know a lot of people did, my opinion shouldn't take anything away from your enjoyment of it. As I said before, I'm not doing a full narrative retrospective, but I do want to talk about the story more broadly once the prologue is completed and the first day in Seattle begins. The first half of the game is played from Ellie's perspective, with her primary goal to find Tommy before he gets himself killed, whilst also hunting the people responsible for Jill's murder. Throughout her part of the story, we'll witness her burgeoning relationship with Dina growing as the pair bond over everything they've gone through to this point. Whilst escaping from a horde of infected, Ellie's gas mask gets damaged, forcing her to reveal to Dina that she's genuinely immune to the cordyceps infection.
What? No! Ellie, no! Stop! I'm not infected. I'm immune. I'm not coughing, do you see? Fuck. Dina. Shit. Can you run?
Yeah. Yes.
Let's fucking go! Go!
Dina takes this opportunity to reveal that she's pregnant, which should be the impetus for Ellie to rethink her plans and the danger she's putting Dina in. Of course, though, she doesn't.
I told you. I'm immune.
Okay. You're immune? Come on.
I was bitten a long time ago.
The fuck are you talking about?
I was bitten and nothing happened.
a chemical burn.
Maria and Tommy and Joel are the only ones who know. Knew. Now you know. I can't get you infected if that's what you're worried about. I can't make you immune either. say something.
Ellie. I think I'm pregnant.
What?
Don't worry, it's not yours.
What are we supposed to do now?
Nothing. I just need to rest for a second.
Are you fucking kidding me? How long have you known?
I was late a few weeks ago.
A few weeks? We could have still turned back.
I didn't know. I wasn't sure, okay? I didn't want to be a burden.
Well, you're a burden now, aren't you? Make sure this place is secured.
After being rescued by Dina's ex and After being rescued by Dina's ex and Ellie's friend Jesse, she continues with her plan to find out who killed Joel, tracking down Nora to a large hospital in the centre of the city. This place is being evacuated by the WLF, giving Ellie the cover she needs to get in and chase Nora down, forcing her to an area filled with spores, effectively killing her via infection.
No, wait.
Back up!
Put your gun down!
You can walk away from this, okay? I can.
Shut the fuck up!
Gun down! Hands up!
Get back!
You have nowhere to go. Get downstairs! Take her out!
Matt's gone!
But Ellie crosses a line here. She tortures Nora to find out where Abby might be, and we can see in the following cutscene that this traumatizes her. But she won't relent. She's become utterly single-minded in her desire for revenge.
Where's Abby?
You're breathing spores. You're her.
You Firefly?
There are no fireflies anymore.
Where's Abby?
I'm fucking dead anyway. Why would I tell you anything?
Because I can make it quick. Or I can make it so much worse.
Think about what he did. How many people are dead because of him?
It's your last chance.
I'm not giving up, my friend.
It's me.
that your blood?
She's hiding out in this aquarium.
Okay. Come on. Let's get you cleaned up. Arms up.
I made her talk. It's okay. I don't want to lose you.
From Nora, she had learned that Abby was likely at an aquarium. As they get closer to their target, Ellie and Jesse hear sniper fire, which Jesse recognises as Tommy's rifle. Jesse wants to go and help Tommy, but Ellie refuses, determined to find Abby. Jesse leaves her, preferring to help the living than avenge the dead. In the aquarium, Ellie finds and confronts Owen and Mel, two of Abby's crew.
Where's Abby?
You're that girl from Jackson.
Tell me where she went. How do we know you won't kill us?
Give her what she wants and we're dead.
You guys can survive this. I just need her.
Bullshit.
You. Come here.
Fucking get over here!
Point to where she is on this map. And then you. It better fucking match up.
What are you doing?
She's probably dead anyway.
It is not worth it.
Stop!
We can talk
Back
about
the fuck up!
Point to where she is.
Fucking point!
After a struggle, Owen is shot through the chest and Ellie is forced to stab Mel to death. Before he dies, Owen tells Ellie that Mel was pregnant, a revelation that utterly breaks Ellie, causing her to collapse down crying when she's found by Tommy and Jesse.
Tell me where Abby is.
Where the fuck is she?
Whoa. Hey. It's all right.
Let's go. Let's go. It's all right.
Starting on the same day that Ellie and Dina arrive in Seattle, Abby is summoned to report to Isaac, the leader of the WLF. On the way, she finds out from Nora that one of her friends, Danny, has been killed by Owen, and Owen is missing. After Isaac briefs her on the plan to wipe out the Seraphites, as the two factions clearly cannot coexist, Abby goes AWOL and heads to the aquarium to find Owen. On the way, she's captured by Seraphites and strung up to be hung ritualistically, only to be saved by two young Seraphites who have broken from the sect, Yara and Lev. Yara has her arm brutally broken with a hammer, but Abby helps them escape and administers some first aid. She finds Owen drunk in a yacht moored in the aquarium. He defended himself from Danny after the pair got into a fight over Owen sparing the life of a defeated Seraphite. He's done with the WLF. He wants to leave with his pregnant girlfriend Mel and find the Fireflies, which was the organisation that he and Abby belonged to as teenagers. They fight, but then ultimately end up having sex. The next day, Abby returns to Yara and Lev. Yara's in a bad way, so she brings the pair back to the aquarium. Mel has arrived and, as a surgeon, explains that Yara has compartment syndrome and the arm needs to be amputated, but they need some medical supplies, so Abby and Lev have to use hidden catwalks across the city's skyscrapers to reach the hospital and retrieve them. Abby's arrested at the hospital for going AWOL, but she's released by Nora, who tells her the only supplies are likely to be in the abandoned and locked down lower levels of the hospital. Cue the fight with the Rat King. Awful. Abby and Lev return to Yara and the surgery is a success. On the third day, Lev runs away. He knows the WLF are about to attack the island the Seraphites live on, and he wants to rescue his mother. Abby and Yara give chase, eventually catching up to Lev crying in their home after he was forced to kill his mother. She attacked him, both for being trans and for trying to leave the Seraphites. At the same time as this reunion, the WLF begin their attack. Abby, Lev and Yara move to escape the battlefield across the island, but Yara is killed by the WLF in the process. On returning to the aquarium, Abby finds the bodies of Owen and Mel and Ellie's map, tracing her movements back to the theatre that Ellie and Dina have been hiding out in.
Abby. What do we do when we find him?
Just figure out how to get in first.
She confronts Ellie, killing Jesse and severely injuring Tommy in the process.
I think I don't know what real gold looks like. Wait till you see this, you son of a bitch. She's gonna love it.
Hands up. Back away from your shit. I said back up!
You're making a big mistake.
Don't fucking turn around. Lev, keep your bow on him. Get on the ground.
You gonna kill me like a coward?
You fucking people. Jesse, stand up! Hands in the air, I shoot this one too.
Don't you do it, Ellie. Get out of here.
Stand up! Now!
Don't you fucking dare!
Shut the fuck up! All right, stop! Stop! Toss your weapon. Toss your weapon!
No.
I know why you killed Joel. He did what he did to save me. There is no cure because of me. I am the one that you want. Just let him go. You killed my friends. We let you both live. And you wasted it. Wait! Get off of her! Go with me! Come on.
They fight in the backstage and lower areas of the theatre, Abby only relenting when a defeated Ellie tells her that Dina is pregnant.
She had nothing to do with it. She's pregnant. Good. Abby. Don't ever let me see you again. Come on.
She leaves the pair of them as bloody messes and spares their lives. Again. In between the chapters, each of our protagonists will have a flashback to some point in the last 4 years. For Ellie, she'll remember her time with Joel, at first with a really sweet sequence of her shortly after the events of the first game. It's her birthday and Joel takes her to a museum a few days away from Jackson. She gets to see a dinosaur exhibit, but most excitingly for her, there's a space travel exhibit. She is a space nerd after all.
Did you know this was here?
Oh, you don't like it. We can head back.
Oh, shut up.
It culminates with Joel and Ellie sitting in a replica of the Apollo capsule, with Ellie listening to the broadcast liftoff audio of Apollo 11. It's actually a genuinely beautiful scene.
Close your eyes. It'll be worth it.
Okay.
Seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
kidding me?
You're welcome, kiddo.
Her second flashback is a couple of years later, with Tommy and Ellie on patrol dealing with infected across the mountains. They'll return to a lodge where Joel is holed up and Ellie shows off what she's learned on the guitar so far. She needs new strings, so they'll go exploring down the mountain looking for the music shop, diverting through an abandoned hotel that's filled with infected. Their relationship is starting to strain at this point. Ellie wants answers about what happened at the hospital in Salt Lake City, but Joel remains tight-lipped. The final flashback is Ellie exploring said hospital. She's travelled by herself from Wyoming to Utah, a journey that will have taken her weeks, if not months. She sees the remnants of Joel's rampage and finds the medical records, including x-rays of her own head that she doesn't quite understand. When Joel arrives to bring her home, she unloads on him, demanding to know what happened. He relents and tells her. Ellie tells her that she's done with him. She's utterly furious with him for taking her choice away, and taking away her opportunity to mean something in this world.
Like that. You talk to me. You don't just leave me a goddamn note.
Tell me what happened here. If you lie to me one more time, I'm gone. You will never see me again. But if you tell me the truth, I'll go back to Jackson. No matter what it is. Joel.
Making a vaccine would have killed you. So I stopped them.
Oh my God. Don't you fucking touch me! I'll go back. But we're done.
Abby's flashbacks are focused around the hospital too. She's the daughter of the surgeon, well, vet, who was going to operate on Ellie. We see her helping her father help a zebra from the Salt Lake City Zoo that's become trapped in razor wire before he's called to the hospital upon Joel and Ellie's arrival. Her second flashback starts with Abby and Owen goofing around on a Ferris wheel at the pier by the aquarium. Owen is taunting Abby, who's afraid of heights, by making the bucket swing back and forth, before pretending to fall off into the water, which forces her to dive in after him. The pair then end up discovering a way inside and exploring the building. There's a sad story in here about a family who are torn apart over time, with the kids leaving to join the Seraphites. Owen also happens to claim the aquarium as his fiefdom, which is why we use it as a base of operations in Abby's story. Her third flashback centres around the aquarium again. This time it's a few weeks before the start of the game. Abby has intel about the whereabouts of Joel and wants to get the gang together to hunt him down. Both Mel and Owen are resistant to the idea, but she manages to convince them to join her own desire for revenge reflecting Ellie's. I don't know about you, but by the end of the game I was really sick of the aquarium. The flashbacks to me don't really enhance the story that much. Abby's flashbacks focus on her on-again, off-again relationship with Owen, which doesn't really pay off into the current day story other than explaining their sex scene and some awkwardness around Mel. There's nothing wrong with the idea of their love triangle, but it severely lacks depth or tension and comes off very superficial. Conversely, Ellie's flashbacks tease a story that I don't think needs to be told. I always thought the ambiguous ending of the first game was perfect. It wasn't a happy ending, nor was it a bad ending, it was just an ending. In such a morally opaque world, it was the perfect way to resolve that narrative, with it being left to the player to decide whether or not Ellie believed what Joel said about the events in the hospital. Part 2 undermines that ending by having Ellie doggedly pushing into what happened and finding out exactly what Joel did. And worse still, this sub-story isn't resolved until the very ending cutscene. I'll get to that shortly, but essentially these flashbacks provide a story that ultimately doesn't make sense until you reach the very last seconds of the game. Ellie has pushed Joel further and further away. You're made to think by the end of her half of the game that she had come to hate Joel, so why would she be so single-minded in her desire for revenge? There has been some criticism levied at the narrative that it's confusing, but it's more that it's just bloated and overwrought. The back and forth between the main story and the flashbacks demolishes the pace of the game. Each day in Seattle ramps tension up as each character pushes towards their inevitable story resolution, but the flashbacks grind that tension to a halt. The first game's chapters undulate nicely between tension and release, with each chapter crescendoing as Joel and Ellie move on with their journey. Part 2 doesn't flow as well. Each day doesn't have that release that allows the player to breathe. Instead, you're confronted by the horrors of the setting, then you're thrown back into the past for an overlong diversion. It becomes tonal whiplash that I found particularly distracting. I get that they were supposed to provide the player with a short stint of relief from the horrors of the main story, whilst adding some backstory, but if I'm honest, they just extend the playtime of the game. For me, I don't think it holds up to deeper scrutiny. Both sides of the story are simultaneously over and underwritten for the kind of story they want to tell. The game suffers from an extremely bloated concept that forces the narrative to be overly long, but because it's split between two separate stories, neither of them gets the detail that they need to tell them effectively. Of the two, Abby's story is infinitely more interesting. I love her relationship with Lev. Abby, as a member of the WLF, has been conditioned to see the Seraphites as little more than savage religious fanatics, lunatics who murder indiscriminately anyone who doesn't fit their religious doctrine. As Abby and Lev travel across the city together, we learn quite a lot about the Seraphites, how they were created by a well-meaning prophet who became a martyr to their cause at the hands of the WLF, and how her message of peace was twisted by the subsequent leaders of the group, and how ceasefires between the two factions just never last.
Scars built all this?
Seraphites.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. It's pretty cool.
What's cool?
Like, impressive. Awesome.
Protect them.
I wonder if your prophet had any idea what she was starting.
She saved dozens of people in ways no one can explain.
She blew up trucks and killed some soldiers. Not that hard to explain.
Have you read her writings?
Skimmed some.
You'd benefit from it.
Sure.
That being said, this plot point manages to add some unwelcome controversy to the game. I'm going to put it out here, I think this framing of the conflict is deeply problematic. The game's director Neil Druckmann grew up in Israel and witnessed the blockading of the Palestinian people into Gaza and the West Bank in the early 2000s. Both of the factions in this game are heavily coded to the Israeli IDF and Hamas. The checkpoints throughout Seattle are disconcertingly reminiscent of the concrete walls that have turned Palestinian territory into ghettos. The WLF's insistence on referring to the Seraphites as scars dehumanizes them, and the concept of them being forced to live in their own special island cut off from the city draws far too many parallels with the real-life situation in the Middle East. The representation of the Seraphites as murderous religious fanatics, to me, feels like a reductive stereotype of Palestinians from Druckmann. No effort is made by the narrative to engage with the Seraphites as human beings. We learn the most about them from Lev, a trans boy who has been ejected from his home and is being hunted by his former people. Instead, they exist simply as enemies to be dealt with. The themes of this game are supposed to revolve around the cycle of violence repeating itself into futility. This is both represented in the micro-narrative of Ellie and Abby, as well as the macro-narrative of the WLF and the Seraphites. But at this macro level, I feel like the game fails because at no point are the Seraphites treated with any sympathy or humanity at all. They are simply shown to be murderous, intolerant, and dogmatic to the point of zealotry. The Seraphites are also shown to have hidden walkways and catwalks across the city to allow them to travel without being spotted by the WLF, mirroring the Palestinian tunnel network that Hamas fighters use. The parallels are blatantly obvious to even the most casual observer. When Part 2 released, many people accused the game of being pro-Israeli propaganda, I don't think it is though. No, to me this game is an attempt at a form of liberal centrism, trying to present a thesis that both sides are as bad as each other, whilst completely missing the power imbalance between them. The WLF are a powerful mechanised fighting force. The Seraphites are shown to be primitive and extreme. The WLF are an enormous army with the resources to wage a guerrilla war. The Seraphites live from the land and eschew quote-unquote old world technology. There is scope to tell this story and make these comparisons to a real-life conflict, but the writers have tried to both sides a conflict where one party is oppressing the other. When such a power imbalance exists, you cannot in good conscience portray both sides as equally bad, and certainly not when one has a history of committing acts of genocide against the other. It doesn't matter that in the game's story the WLF fail in their attempts to destroy the Seraphites, this centrist view of the conflict is simply wrong. Neil Druckmann has a history of bringing controversial ideas to the series that come from a place of either ignorance or arrogance. In a 2013 interview with The Verge, Druckmann ruminated on an early concept for The Last of Us titled Mankind, where the cordyceps infection would only affect women. Ellie would be the only one immune, and the enemies you would be fighting in the game would all be women. It took for female members of staff at Naughty Dog to rethink it. Quote, "The reason it failed is because it was a misogynistic idea," end quote, Druckmann said in that interview. The gaming press have talked up Druckmann as a legendary figure within the gaming industry, talked of in the same breath as Hideo Kojima. But at this point I'm of the mind that I prefer him to be kept from the writer's room. Let him direct games, sure, but don't let him write them. With the knowledge of Mankind fresh in my brain, I started to think more about how Druckmann approached the characters. For Part 2, Druckmann became both the game director and the creative director for the project, sharing writing duties with Haley Gross and directing duties with Kurt Margenau and Anthony Newman. However, unlike with the first game, Druckmann became the driving force of both work streams. For The Last of Us Part 1, Druckmann worked hand in hand with Bruce Straley, who was senior to Druckmann in the company. They've discussed in the past that the writing process of the first game was like a 50-50 collaboration, and it really seems like Straley was a calming influence on some of Druckmann's worst impulses. But after Straley left Naughty Dog following the fraught, crunch-laden development of Uncharted 4, Druckmann stepped into leadership and has become a sort of talisman for the company. I have no way to verify this, but it seems to me like he doesn't have someone challenging his ideas. Since the game came out, it's always been Neil Druckmann who's been given interviews about the writing and development process. There have been hardly any interviews with Haley Gross or either of Druckmann's co-directors, so I'm going to push the following accusations directly at him. I think that the game is awful to all of the female characters. Every single one of them is shown to suffer in more and more graphic ways. Now, I know what some of you are going to say. The game is about humans being awful to each other, and to a degree, you'd be right. But if you dig a little deeper on that, there is a dark and disturbing undercurrent of violence towards women that is, frankly, astonishing. Let me lay this out. The primary and secondary cast of men consists of Joel, Tommy, Jesse, Owen, Lev, Manny, and Isaac. The female cast consists of Ellie, Dina, Abby, Yara, Nora, and Mel. Taking Ellie and Abby aside for now, this is what happens to each character, starting with the men. Joel is killed in a brutal attack by Abby after being beaten senseless, but his death is off screen as the camera is focused on Ellie's reaction. Tommy is shot through the leg by Abby and through the back of the head by Lev, but lives, just missing an eye. Jesse is killed quickly by Abby shooting him in the head. Owen is killed by Ellie shooting him in the chest and he bleeds out. Manny is shot through the head by Tommy and is off screen immediately so we can see Abby's reaction to losing her friend. Lev is hunted by the Seraphites, then beaten and enslaved in Santa Barbara and then rescued by Abby. Isaac is killed off screen in the WLF assault on the Seraphites. And now the women. Dina is beaten to a pulp by Abby as Ellie watches on, right after Lev has put an arrow through her shoulder. Her life is only spared when Ellie points out that Dina is pregnant. Nora is infected by cordyceps spores whilst running from Ellie. Ellie then beats and tortures her to find out information on Abby's location. Yara has her arm graphically broken by a Seraphite who beats her with a hammer. Her arm has to be amputated after she develops compartment syndrome. She's then killed with a gunshot to the head by the WLF while trying to escape the Seraphite island. Mel is killed after trying to defend Owen from Ellie in a graphic close-up QuickTime event where she ends up being stabbed in the neck and bleeding out on the floor while 7 months pregnant. There is a double standard at play here. The men in this game are either killed off camera or in a quick as a flash moment that you barely have time to register during an action sequence, whereas the women are methodically and graphically brutalised in these slow close-up animations. Hell, the most disturbing one on that list, Mel's death, is a fucking QuickTime event. There's a pattern of behaviour here in Neil Druckmann's writing, which honestly makes me deeply uncomfortable. In the first game, his worst impulses were reined in. There was implicit violence towards women, most notably with the iconic sequence with David in the latter third of the game, but it was never anything close to this. Some people have defended this as a form of artistic expression, a storytelling method that is supposed to make people uncomfortable, that's supposed to put a spotlight on violence. But I'd counter that, arguing that this presentation of violence towards women is almost fetishistic, with intimate close-up camera angles of these women suffering in ways that aren't presented to the male characters. This isn't a fucked up form of equality, this is torture porn. And it gets worse when you get to the epilogue of the game. After Abby has left Ellie and Dina injured on the floor of the theatre, we get the epilogue, and what I believe should have been the ending cutscenes. We cut to about a year later. Ellie and Dina are living on a farm outside of Jackson, enjoying family life with their new baby JJ. It's really sweet, both of them seem to be happy and they live a simple domestic life. But Ellie is haunted by PTSD and flashbacks of Joel's death and the things that she did in Seattle. She can't sleep, she doesn't rest. She did terrible things, and even though she has a happy life, she can't escape the choices she made. We then see Abby and Lev in Santa Barbara looking for clues as to the location of the rumoured Firefly compound in the area. Finding a CB radio in a hidden basement, Abby makes contact with the group and she's told to rendezvous with them. She has hope for the first time in forever, but as the pair leave the house, they're ambushed by some guys who take the pair by surprise and kidnap them. So much for hope. Cutting back to the farm, Tommy arrives, explaining that he's now separated from Maria. He looks like shit, limping on a busted leg, and he lost his eye after Lev had hit him with an arrow in the theatre. Eye for an eye. Get it? He explains that he's gotten word on where Abby might be, causing Dina to kick him out. Ellie has a haunted expression on her face. That night she can't sleep. She packs her stuff and goes to leave. Dina pleads with her to stay, but Ellie says she needs to finish it. Dina says Ellie has to make a choice, and Ellie chooses to go, ripping apart their family.
I can't. So what? I'm just supposed to sit here and wait for you? For God knows how long, just thinking you're fucking dead the entire time?
I don't plan on dying.
Yeah, well, neither did Jesse. Or Joel. Hey, stop. Hey, come on. We've got a family. She doesn't get to be more important than that. No. I'm not gonna do this again.
That's up to you.
Ellie hunts for clues to where Abby is, encountering some infected and then eventually the slavers that took Abby. She's badly wounded by one of their traps, but she gets the better of them, finding out that they have Abby in a resort by the coast. After one last fraught stealth section against multiple infected and human enemies, Ellie releases the slaves and she's told that Abby is down on the beach, being punished for trying to escape. Ellie finds Abby tied to a pillar in the open sun. Her hair has been cut and she's lost a lot of her muscle mass. Ellie takes pity on Abby and cuts her down, and once Abby has released Lev from his pillar, the three head to boats moored on the beach. Ellie starts to unmoor her boat, but she can't let it go. Abby refuses to fight, but Ellie keeps goading her and the final fight begins.
I can't let you leave. I'm not doing this.
No.
I'm not gonna fight you. Yes, you will. He's not a part of this. You made him a part of this. Okay. Okay.
For me, this fight is brutal and entirely unnecessary. Ellie has lost everything. Her only focus is killing Abby. They punch, kick, stab and cut at each other. At one point, Abby actually bites 2 of Ellie's fingers off. The fight culminates with Ellie holding Abby under the water, trying to drown her. She gets a flash of Joel from the flashback we haven't seen yet, and she stops. She releases Abby, deciding to break the cycle of violence that has taken so much from her. She sits in the surf alone, watching Abby and Lev leave. We then cut to Ellie returning back to the farm. Dina and JJ have left, the house is bare, just a shell of the home it once was and could have been. In the study, Ellie finds her stuff packed up. She takes out her guitar and tries to play a song that Joel had taught her, which had been a theme throughout the game. But missing the ring and pinky finger on her left hand, she can't play it anymore. The final flashback then starts. Taking place the night before Joel was killed, Ellie goes to see him after he tried to defend her and Dina at a party in Jackson. They talk awkwardly until the subject of Utah comes up again. Joel tells her if he could do it again, he absolutely would. He has no regrets about saving her life. She tells him that she can't forgive him yet, but she'd like to forgive him one day, giving their relationship some hope of reconciliation.
You're such an asshole.
I'm not trying to.
I was supposed to die in that hospital. My life would have fucking mattered. But you took that from me.
If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
I don't think I can ever forgive you for that. But I would like to try.
I'd like that.
Okay. I'll see you around.
Yep.
Ellie puts the guitar down and leaves the farmhouse. She's lost everything. Her father figure, the love of her life, her adoptive son, and even her form of emotional expression. Her quest for revenge has taken everything from her. She has nothing to show for it, other than loss, pain, and loneliness. I've talked at length with people about this ending, both defenders and critics of it. For me, I'm on the critical side of it, but in the same breath, I do understand the views of folks who love this ending. Ellie breaks the cycle of violence, but she's punished for it. She's lost everything, and she ends the game the defeated villain of the piece. It does make sense. For me though, this ending is just nihilistic. I'm not saying that Ellie needed a good ending. In fact, if we hadn't had the epilogue in Santa Barbara, ending the game on the farm would have been perfectly in line with the ending of the first game. On the surface, Ellie would have got a good ending, but the PTSD she inflicted upon herself would have robbed her of that happy ending. She would have been a shell of who she was, still the villain of the piece and unable to enjoy that happy ending. Conversely, Abby should have had a hopeful ending. Her story with Lev is much more about her own personal redemption, as she comes to care for a person who she previously would have seen as nothing more than a savage zealot. She not only saves his life, but she cares about him. She gives him a purpose and a life away from the Seraphites as the pair search for the Fireflies. As far as Abby is concerned, once she left Ellie alive in that theatre, that should have been the end of it. I'm not suggesting that Abby is a good person. She is a murderer just like Ellie, but her story shows some significant growth. She has an arc that changes how we as the player see her over the course of the game. In my mind, everything up to the point where Abby and Lev were ambushed should have been her ending. That would have perfectly capped off the story that was written for her. Instead, what we were given was an unreasonably brutal ending fight that borders on more torture porn. Both Ellie and Abby are severely injured, yet beating the ever-loving shit out of each other in the sea. Yes, it's supposed to make the player uncomfortable. Yes, by this point you should be screaming at Ellie to stop and to not try and kill Abby. But to what end? By indulging in this vicious, close-up bruising fight, the game just drags the player into that same cycle of violence the game is supposed to be decrying. It's not satisfying, it's not cathartic, it's just awful. Ellie's story stands stark against Abby's. At no point did the story have Abby showing any remorse or grief for killing Joel. She got her revenge and then moved on with her life. She murdered a man who murdered her father and then she just carried on. Ellie is the one who took her revenge too far. Abby could have murdered Ellie and Tommy in the opening, or Ellie and Dina in the theatre. She didn't. She wanted revenge on Joel, not to murder indiscriminately. Ellie, on the other hand, went to extremes in her quest, losing perspective and allowing herself to fall into the darkness that violence can breed. Ultimately, I wonder then, what was the point in making this story? Neither character is giving a narratively satisfying resolution to their story. Either we have a villain turned sympathetic hero who was brutalized through the game, or we have a hero turned narcissistic murderer who destroys her whole life. This has to be hands down the most nihilistic game I've ever played. What I'm getting at is this game didn't need to be made. Or at the very least it didn't need to be made this way. The Last of Us works so well as a self-contained story, a piece of post-apocalyptic fiction that blossomed based on the small story encapsulated within that huge journey from Boston to Utah. Joel and Ellie were the driver for that first game. Their chemistry, the dialogue between them carried that story forward and made it compelling. I feel like there's elements of that in Abby's story when she's travelling across the city with Lev, and for me that's where the game shines the brightest. Two people from wildly different backgrounds learning about each other as they work together to survive. That's what worked so well about the first game. Ellie's story was perfectly complete in part 1. Returning to this universe with her was a mistake in my opinion. It's been established in the canon and via the first season of the TV show that the cordyceps infection was a global pandemic. There are infinite stories that could be told of survivors, well, surviving. Hell, make the whole game about Abby, let her story have the time and space to breathe and really develop her as a character. By the end of the game, I really enjoyed Abby and Lev, but there's an even better story in those characters that could have been brought to the fore. It could have been brilliant. Instead, what we were given was a game that was too long for the kind of stories it was trying to tell, yet too short to tell the two stories effectively. The game suffered as a result, becoming a bloated, unwieldy narrative wrapped around what is, unfortunately, one of the best stealth action games I've ever played. It's a game at war with itself, the ungainly story and annoying structure taking the sheen away from one of the most mechanically magnificent games ever made. And the worst part of it is, there is some utterly brilliant writing in this game. Dialogue is snappy and highly polished. Flavor text and notes in the world tell small but utterly compelling little stories. Even the cannon fodder enemies are well written. It's the story that drags this game down, it's the concept, it's Neil Druckmann's horrendous behaviours. Many of the opinions I've heard about The Last of Us Part 2 revolve around the moments that will stay with people. So many players gush about the ending or about some of the more brutally violent moments where you really come to reflect on the people you're playing as. And maybe that is a sign of a good game. My favourite games of all time have moments that stick with me long after the credits roll. But not this game. Even as I type this now, a week after completing the game, some of the events are becoming hazy for me. They haven't stuck with me. Whereas I can practically recite the script of the first game for you. This is where The Last of Us Part 2 fails for me. That being said, what will stay with me is that letter to Santa. It might well be one of the saddest things I've ever read, and it's utterly perfect. It's 84 words that tell me so much about this young boy, Eric. His fear, his hope, that his father is struggling, and that even in the apocalypse, he still believes in Santa Claus. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope, even if you disagree with my opinions, you still took something from it. If you enjoyed it, or if you hated it and want to keep up with my wrong opinions, please do hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm still chasing that goal of 100 subscribers and I'm getting so close. Please also consider joining my free Patreon where you can keep up to date with my progress making my next videos and get some behind the scenes thoughts as I go through the creative process. Lastly, if you want to use any of the footage I captured for this video, it's all being uploaded to my second channel, Gadget on Gaming Footage, where you're free to download and use the footage for your own projects. The link is in the description. But for now, that's all from me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Good night.